Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security.
My guest today on the Cognitive Crucible is Major General Susan Coyle, who is the head of information warfare for the Australian Defence Force. General Coyle, welcome to the Cognitive Crucible.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to have you on the show today. I'm really looking forward to it.
And our audience, I guarantee you, is very interested to hear your point of view on this challenge that we are facing. To get started, General, would you mind giving our audience a little bit more background on your career and how you wound up in the seat that you are currently sitting in?
Yes, certainly. So I've been fortunate enough to have served my nation for the past 33 years. I'm a Signals Corps officer by way of background. I have dabbled into a little bit into the satellite communication space as well. I've been honoured to command at every rank so far in my career, and probably the highlight, other than this job, of course, which has I would say one of the coolest titles, Head of Information Warfare, was the privilege for the last 12 months to have commanded Australian forces in the Middle East for a year. So I've had a pretty diverse career, but all of the things that I've done would happen only because of the wonderful people that I've been honoured to serve with, and the allies and partners that we work alongside. So that's pretty much my career. It's just been as a steward of our organisation and a proud leader of being in the Australian Defence Force.
I understand that the Australian Defence Force established the Information Warfare Division relatively recently, I think maybe 2017 or so. Could you review for our audience the scope of your responsibilities and your primary areas of focus?
Yeah, certainly, John. So I think we're about the same age as the IPA, I think, in terms of how long we've been alive.
Yep, that sounds about right. Yep.
Yeah, to give your listeners a bit of background, Information Warfare Division was formed in July of 2017. And as you said, we've recently just turned 4 years old. Since its inception, a number of important developments have occurred. Australia now recognises information and cyber as the fifth warfighting domain. And as Information Warfare Division is working with the services, our groups and other agencies to ensure that our joint force is ready and capable to fight and win in that domain. So it's really exciting. You know, the fifth warfighting domain is what we colloquially refer to ourselves as. The Information Warfare Division, which is the division that I'm honoured to lead at the moment, is a part of our Joint Capabilities Group inside Defence. And I have 4 branches within my division. One branch looks after information warfare specifically in terms of cyber, electronic warfare, influence activities and the like. And then I have 3 other branches. One does joint C4, one does space services, and one does more broadly joint integrated capabilities. But I'm a capability manager on behalf of the Chief of Joint Capabilities, and I have over 60 major projects that I'm responsible for delivering capability for our warfighter. As the actual head of information warfare specifically, my primary focus area is to lead the development of ADF information warfare capabilities, and by doing that, to try and formulate what strategies and plans we need to counter contemporary threats in the information environment. So it's a really exciting role. I'm 7 months into the job. I'm here for 2 or 3 years in this position, learning a lot, engaged, really actively involved in our community, and it's a really important area to be a part of.
Yeah, without a doubt, that is that's an astonishing scope of responsibility. But as you said, it's never been a more interesting and exciting, and I'm sure rewarding time to be a part of the Australian Defence Force. Getting into some more operational matters, I guess, strategic matters as well. How do you see China and others using information warfare as a tool of influence in the wider Australasia and Oceania areas, especially towards vulnerable island nations?
Yeah, so firstly, I'd probably start by saying that that my government, the Australian government, has made clear that we want to see China exercise its power in a way that enhances stability, in a way that reinforces the international rules-based order, and that Australia remains committed to a constructive bilateral relationship with China in which we can continue to work together for mutual benefit. Similarly, we're committed as part of a whole of government approach to working with our partners in the region under Australia's Pacific Step Up program, which is something that we've been engaged in. However, and to answer your question, you only have to look at the government's 2020 Defence Strategic Update to understand that our environment is now more complex. Our Australian interests are being more directly challenged than ever in our past. And this includes the growing strategic competition that you referred to, increasingly aggressive grey zone tactics. These are coercive measures below the threshold for a conventional military response. You only have to look at how some countries are using the global COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity to seek greater influence, in an effort to understand the broad trends towards a more competitive and contested Indo-Pacific region for us. Information Warfare Division is absolutely focused on delivering capabilities to assist defence to shape, deter and to respond to these increasing grey zone tactics, as well as capabilities across the spectrum of conflict. And this for me means that defence activities through cooperation to competition and if required to high-end conflict anywhere that defence is called.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to ask you a follow-up on that, if I may. There's a lot of talk in the U.S. and other parts of the world that the current competition with China, in particular, is especially vivid, and it's a whole lot different than the Cold War with the former Soviet Union, because China is so enmeshed in the world economy. I'm curious if you have a perspective on this as to how Australia might be tied in with the Chinese economy. For example, I understand that 5G considerations are a especially live topic within Australia and other areas of the South Pacific and other supply chain issues. Do you have any comment on any of that?
Look, probably what I would say is that, just like I think China is the United States' primary economic, partner in terms of who you operate the most with globally, well, China is ours as well. So, I think in terms of what businesses we get involved in and where they belong and their ownership and that, it is an important issue for our government, and our government just wants to make sure that whatever economic interests we're involved in are in the interests of Australia and gives us a fair ability to be able to manage and control those resources. So, I am aware of the 5G discussions that have been occurring. I think that it's really a matter for our politicians to decide which companies we engage with and where. From a military perspective, as I said at the start, we just want to make sure that they're exercising their power in a way that enhances stability. So as long as they're focused on that, and we have freedom of navigation and all the other things that are outlined in our defence white paper haven't been changed, we're actually very comfortable in the way that we're tracking now with our allies and partners in the region.
I see. You mentioned a few moments ago when you were recapping your purview, including space-related operations. But you mentioned that you have something like 60 different projects that are going. Which of those would you say are at the top of the inbox as far as the most significant capability investments that you guys are exploring right now, and why?
It's a great question. So we have each of our services, so Army, Air Force and Navy, as well as joint capabilities and other areas of defence, we all bid for projects as part of what we call our integrated investment plan, our IIP. And to get that through, we have to go through a pretty significant committee process to justify not only internally to defence but to government why we need to invest in a capability, what it's going to deliver for the defence force, what it's going to give for government. how much Australian industry content is involved, for example. And so across all of the projects that we have, they've gone through a robust mechanism, and they've all been given an allocation of time in terms of when they will be delivered. So a lot of my projects, some of them won't come into existence for another decade, for example. One example is we're developing a sovereign satellite communications capability as we go forward, which is great for industry. It's great for Australia. And we're working through that at the moment. So it's early, it's embryonic and nascent in its delivery at the moment. We're still in the point where we're engaging with industry to get after that. But it's exciting for us, as a nation in our own right. And we're still quite a young nation in the broad scheme of things across the globe. But we're doing a lot of things like that. So cyber, electronic warfare, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, all of those types of projects, which are absolutely fundamental to provide us an ability to be able to be a really good defence force and to be able to be a good ally and partner. So there's a number of significant information warfare capability investments that we're getting after here in the Australian Defence Force that we're exploring in the near future. And if you'll allow me, I'll just tell you about a couple of them, which I think are really interesting. So
yeah, please do. Yeah.
Australia is investing approximately $15 billion in information and cyber domain capabilities over the next decade, which is very exciting for us. Defence is investing heavily right across the information and cyber domain requirements, which will allow us to prepare the ADF for any high-intensity operations, but also, and equally importantly, to increase our resilience to ensure that Australia is positioned to make an even stronger contribution to regional security. So at a strategic level, for example, we have to be able to assure the informational aspects of all of our capabilities, to provide information and advice where it's needed, and also to be able to affect an adversary. And then so to concentrate on just one or two of those three pillars would be to misunderstand the significance as a whole, in my opinion. Information warfare is a complex phenomenon involving coordination across multiple parts of defence, which supports that whole of government effort. And, for me personally, that whole of government effort is really critical to this. We're moving away from stovepiping, as I think we've done in the past. And in the information warfare capabilities in particular is more reason today than ever that we're all nuanced and connected. And synchronisation and coordination are going to be key for any information warfare success, whether it be at the capability development end all the way through to the conduct of operations. However, I see the most significant investment both the Information Warfare Division and the Australian government's making is in our people. And I've got to tell you, John, I'm absolutely passionate about our people. Recruitment, training, organisation of them and retention. They're all key priorities, and they're the single most important input to our capabilities that is going to give us a capability edge over our adversaries.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I really appreciate your mention about whole of government approach. Totally concur. That is the way to go. Easy to say, less easy to do, but nevertheless, I think it's a project that the West in general needs to get on board with as soon as possible. Yeah, and you also mentioned partnerships. I totally agree. Partnerships has come up over and over again on this podcast as a critical part of collectively orienting on and addressing the challenge. Could you discuss how you and your colleagues are deepening partnerships, for example, with industry or academia, with the Quad nations, India, Japan, Australia, and the United States? And also, perhaps could you talk a little bit about some partnerships that you are nurturing, but that you would like to deepen a little bit more?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I absolutely agree with the podcast on that importance of nurturing partnerships. It's absolutely vital. And COVID's been that particularly unique challenge that certainly highlighted how much the division, we rely on that external partnering, and we've suffered from the impediments and barriers that COVID has thrown at us. There's just nothing better than having a face-to-face with somebody, is there? And I think, you talk about Quad and allies, industry, academia. I mean, we have great relationships here within Australia, with industry, with academia. We have wonderful and very long partnerships with allies and partners, in particular the United States, our Five Eye community, and also our allies and partners in the region here. And, they're all at different stages of development, but they're all wonderful, maturing relationships. I think in terms of the opportunities going forward, bilats, multilats, all of those things are going to continue and are necessary. Despite what COVID has thrown at us, though, we're still relatively trying to lean forward as much as possible. And the classic is just doing this podcast. I mean, these sorts of opportunities have to continue so that we educate our listeners on the opportunities that are out there. We regularly engage with experts in defence and foreign policy. We participate in think tanks. We give funding to academic institutions to help get after some, like wicked problems or ideas that we need some further analysis done on. We draw on public commentary and commissioning academics to inform that thinking for us, to help us to get around some of the thinking that we need to get after. We sponsor a number of programs and projects that are providing wonderful opportunity for our Australian industry to deliver emerging and next generation technologies to build on that sovereign and skilled industrial base that I mentioned earlier with one of our satellite projects and the like. We also work closely to our allies across a range of operational and project-related matters, and we do look forward to re-establishing that face-to-face collaboration again, hopefully in the near future, would be my hope. Ultimately, and I can tell you this after over 3 decades in defence, our success is absolutely underpinned by deep levels of cooperation, whether they be training activities, exercises, operations, intelligence, capability development, science and tech, industry, and deep people-to-people links. I mean, there are so many opportunities, I think, for building really strong and authentic relationships. And it's just something we've got to continue to do as we work together.
Yeah, well, all of that sounds like it is a pressing agenda to pursue on all those lines. Could we talk about labor for just a moment? What steps are you and your colleagues taking to train your current and future information warfare operators? And are there any other labor challenges that you're experiencing? I should say, from the United States, manpower challenges are at the top of the stack for orienting and navigating the problem. The competition is not just with nation state adversaries, but the competition is also with the private sector, which is, as you are well aware, General, is very much recruiting the very top talent for artificial intelligence and other technical cyber skills. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I couldn't agree more with you. I think our labour challenges are probably everyone's greatest challenge everywhere, to be honest. I mean, there's been no better time to get a job somewhere, because if you bring some skills to the table, you're absolutely employable. And I think one of the things we're seeing here in Australia at the moment is, particularly in our consultants and our contracted workforces, is they're actually competing with each other, and it's driving the dollar value up, which has a follow-on impact to organisations like Defence, who are trying to recruit these people to be part of our teams. For me, successful information warfare is the convergence of a number of multiple information-related capabilities, and professionalising that and getting after it with the right workforce is going to be critical. Professionalising the workforces for every capability that we're getting after is a first step, and one that the services predominantly take. So our Australian Defence Force, is working really hard to get the right people in the door. And then once they're in the door, it's up to people like me and the teams that I'm working with to retain them, to grow them, empower them, and then retain them. I think, our professionalisation of the workforce that's able to plan, coordinate, and then converge what we do across multiple domains is a whole nother skill set as we go forward. Our Defence Force has recognised this with our own Information Operations Staff Officer course, along with elements in our joint operational planning. We've engaged with universities on academic courses, particularly at the master's level. We're finding that's a really useful level for us. Principally, however, we're turning our minds to how defence information warfare must sit as part of that broader environment, to where information is everywhere, but relevant information is harder and harder to find. Training our operators to understand their specific mission set as part of this whole of government team approach is going to be crucial to our success as we go forward. I think there's a lot of people interested in working in this space, and probably one of the other things I would say is that I used to worry that if we lost, like, if someone in uniform, like yourself, has served and then you leave, it's actually not a loss to the organisation if the work that you do still is nested as part of our national security efforts. And I think we should embrace that, because you're bringing new skill sets to your new area, as do people that come into ours. And, my workforce here, I have my Information Warfare Division has contractors and consultants. It has Australian Public Service members as part of the Department of Defence, and it has Australian Defence Force uniform members. And, it's the collective strength of those three groups working together, which is our greatest capability, our people there. And they each bring different things, and they've each got different backgrounds and experiences, but they're all contributing, and I think we're very proud to have them on our team.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I'd like to ask you a follow-up, if I may. And I'm aware that the U.S. military, at least, is considering, I don't actually know what the actual policy implementations have been, but they're considering non-traditional service members, or non-traditional entry into the military in order to help address some of these labor challenges. So, for example, I'm a retired Marine, and the Marines especially are very proud of physical fitness and being able to go to any climb and place and take care of the mission. But with today's labor challenges, it might make a lot of sense that somebody who has the technical skills in cyber or artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, but perhaps they are just not the traditional looking Marine or soldier. But those people, I think, are, should at least be considered for military service. Or another option is bringing somebody in from the private sector who is again has relevant skills, and bring them in, make them a gunnery sergeant, or make them a captain for 3 or 4 years, and so basically some non-traditional talent acquisition. Have you and your colleagues considered anything along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really interesting, and gosh, isn't it a controversial thing for some people, though, to have somebody in uniform hasn't done a traditional entry path into an organisation. So we refer, I'll talk about it from an Army lens, which I'm more familiar with, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So in the Australian Army, we've created a new entry called Specialist Service Soldiers and Specialist Service Officers. So these are the types of people that you're referring to, the people that have these niche skills that we're only bringing in to do a specialist role. But they want to serve, they want to volunteer to serve their nation, and they want to do it in uniform, because, as you know, we could bring anyone in under the Australian Public Service and bring them in, because we don't have to follow the same strict standards in terms of fitness tests and things of that nature. And we will, I suspect, accept some risk with those that we bring in. I mean, for us, the main purpose isn't whether they can run a physical fitness test and be the fittest. It's whether or not they have the values of the organisation that we want them to serve in. And for us, that's equally important. And, to be honest, we need both. We need people that we can still send forward and be on the front line, and who are going to be able to have to fire a weapon and have to be part of a team and understand how to support each other in an operational context. But equally, we need people that are going to be in reach-back locations, who are, to use the colloquial verse of, having a guy with a pigtail who works in a dark, sub-basement, getting after whatever it is that we're asking them to get after in whatever specialisation it is. So I think we need both, and we're trying to get after both now. So, our recruiting is advertising for the jobs we're trying to get after, whether it be a cyber warfare analyst, or whether it be threat assessment intelligence analyst. And we get these people in, and then we have a look at where best we place them, whether we put them on our traditional paths coming in, or whether we treat them as a niche specialist as we go forward. It's an interesting point about those from private sector. A few decades ago when I first joined, if you got out of the Army or out of the military for a period of time, you're seen as disloyal because you'd left. Whereas we absolutely encourage it these days. We encourage secondments to industry or academia. We encourage people to go out and have a year or two and get a bit broader experience and then bring those skills and experience back, because it makes them better and it makes our organisation stronger. Our partnership, we have this terminology in defence called fundamental inputs to capability. It's how we get after projects and the like. And, it's all about people, and it's all about training and facilities and simulation and all these things we have to get after to create a capability. It's equally about industry. So the more interaction we have with industry and academia, the better we are going to be able to support one another's needs as we go forward, and the stronger we will be as a nation to get after whatever challenges we face in the future.
Concur with all of that. Before we conclude, General, I'd like to ask you if you could recommend professional military education is a big part of the military culture. Is there a good book or other online resource that is on your nightstand that you could recommend to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to your podcast, of course, is what we're referring to, isn't it?
Okay, yes, that's right.
Look, I'm an avid reader. I absolutely love it. And there is so much out there at the moment, on topics like digital strategy. I would recommend Robert Kaplan's The Return of Marco Polo's World. What a great book, talking about some of the geostrategic currents that drive societies in the future. And I think that's really important to get a broader, holistic view of things. If you're talking about information or disinformation, Peter Singer's book, his Like War book, what a cracking read that was. Absolutely compelling about how digital media campaigns will capture our imagination. I think also if you're talking about cyber, you can't really go past David Sanger's book, The Perfect Weapon. That's a great read, war, sabotage and fear in the cyber age. I mean, it doesn't get any more real than that. And it's important to point out that none of the apocalypses that he predicts has actually happened yet, though. And then from an Australian journalist perspective, for those that are interested, I'd recommend one of our local Australian commentators, Paul Kelly. He writes in our Australian newspaper, and he recently wrote a really excellent review that reflected on the limits of the digital age. It was called Let Down by the Golden Promise of Digital Age. And, he does many reviews on US authors and books as well. He did a recent review on a book by Robert Gordon, which was called The Rise and Fall of American Growth. It talked about the US living standards since the Civil War, and again, a really important read. And yeah, books will remain important even when, and especially if the lights go off, won't they? I just love it. Most of my books these days are on a Kindle, and I've got hundreds loaded up. And whenever I go anywhere and someone recommends a good book, I've purchased it and it's on my Kindle by the time I get home. So it's always a good thing. So hopefully those are of interest to people if they haven't read them already.
Absolutely. Those are some fantastic suggestions. And of course, we will have links to those resources in the show notes. And with that, Major General Susan Coyle, I wish you and your colleagues Godspeed as you continue standing up your division and orienting and operating in the information space. And with that, Susan Coyle, thank you so much for being on the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you very much, Don. It's been an honor. Wish you all the best as well.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.